Hello, my name is Joseph Kayumba. I'm going to be your trainer on this training course, Food Safety and Hygiene. It's going to be on level 2. I'm a trainer and I'm an assessor and a former food and hygiene inspector for the past 14 years. So today's content, what we're going to cover. So I'm just going to go through what we're going to cover. So there'll be an introduction on food safety and hygiene, introduction, food safety. We're going to discuss what is food safety, and we're going to talk about food safety legislation, the type of legislation that we have to follow if we are in the food industry, if we provide food to the public. We want to speak about food hygiene itself. We want to speak about food contamination, and we want to speak about storage and temperature control, personal hygiene, that is very important. We want to speak about food premises and equipment. And after that, we'll cover cleaning and disinfection. I want to talk about pest control, and that will be the end of assessment. Now, today's food hygiene training is being delivered at level 2. So this is level 2. We provide level 1, level 2, and level 3. Obviously, level 2 is for food handlers. If you are working in a food establishment, in a takeaway, so you need to have a basic knowledge about food safety and hygiene. So this is level 2. But if you are, for example, a manager or a supervisor, we always advise people to have level 3 or level 4. Now, today's food and hygiene training complies with EU food safety regulations. So I'm going to ask you to take your note and your pen, take the note. Okay, so at the end of this training, there will be 27 multiple choice questions to complete at the end of the training. Okay, and you've got to make sure that you pass at least, the pass mark is 18 points. So you've got to make sure that you get 18 out of 27 in order for you to get a certificate. So the multiple choice questions that are going to be very, very easy, and they'll come from what we are covering today. So that's why I'm asking you to take take some notes. Okay, you take some notes, and because it's a video, you can go back again, once more again, and again until you understand, so you can pass your test and get your certificate. Now, food safety hygiene, across the United Kingdom, you see thousands of incidents from food poisoning occur, and many have resulted in death. That's the reason why the basic understanding of food safety is very, very important. So everyone who works in a food establishment, they need to have at least level 2 of food safety hygiene in order for them to keep themselves safe and also keep those that are buying food from you safe. Now, most common cause of food poisoning in the United Kingdom is caused by a bacteria that we call Campylobacter. That's the name of that bacteria. So this is the most common cause of food poisoning in this country. Now, it is a legal requirement for employers and employees to comply with the EU and the domestic food safety laws. Now, you will understand that the United Kingdom is not part of the EU anymore. So before Brexit, we used to use the EU. Now, at the moment, so we're going to be using the domestic food safety laws until everything has come into place. Okay. Now, employers and employees must comply with company rules and regulations to avoid food poisoning by working in hygienic manner at all times. So the first section we're going to cover is food safety. Obviously, before we go any further, you should be able to understand what is food safety. We're going to cover also food poisoning, food handlers, and also compliance. So what is food safety? When you come across this terminology, you've got to think about three things. When it comes to food safety refers to handling, preparation, and storage. So the way you handle food, the way you prepare food, and the way you store food in the ways that prevent food poisoning illness. So that's the food safety. So food safety, it's simple to understand. What is food safety? Food safety refers to handling, preparation, and storage of food in a way to prevent food poisoning illness. Now, this includes a sequence that should be followed to avoid potentially severe health hazards. Okay, so these three steps are very important to follow. The handling of the food. How do you handle food? Do you handle food with care? Are your hands clean in order for you to wash? To handle food. The way you prepare food, are you taking every necessary precautions to make sure that the food is not contaminated while you are preparing it? And also storage. Storage is, do you have the correct temperature to store that food? When you're storing the food, when you're cooking it, do you have the correct temperature? Now, in everything that we do, we've got to make sure the food, okay, it is not contaminated. Make sure that the food is not contaminated to prevent food poisoning illnesses. That's a food safety definition. Now, food poisoning illness is caused by eating contaminated food. So obviously, when you eat any contaminated food, then you are likely to get food poisoning illness. Okay. Now, what are the benefits of food safety? You know the definition of food safety. Now, the benefit of food safety. Number one, obviously, it reduces serious food poisoning illness. It reduces serious food poisoning illness. Number two, the benefit of food safety, it ensures that customers do not suffer food poisoning illness as a result of eating contaminated food in your business establishment. So the food that you are selling to the public, you have to make sure that the food is fit for human consumption to avoid food poisoning illnesses. Okay, the benefit of food safety, it stops the outbreak of food poisoning, which can lead to prosecution and also a major claim by the customer. We know that there are so many news in the media. We heard that people have died as a result of eating contaminated food. So you've got to be very careful. You as a food operator, as a food business operator, as a food business owner, so you've got to be very careful the type of food that you give to your customer. Is it safe? Is it fit for human consumption? Is it not contaminated? That's the reason why this type of training is very important. So you get some basic knowledge on how to make sure that you keep people safe. Now, a food handler. Who is a food handler? A food handler is anyone who handles food in the food establishment. So every food handler must ensure that the food is served to the public is not contaminated. So food safety should be everyone employees concerned. That's why training of employees, as I said before, is essential in every catering establishment. When we talk about compliance, compliance with the laws and legislation is very important. So if you are a food business owner, you've got to make sure that you comply with all legislation, because it's very important, because non-compliance resulted in a prosecution and can lead to heavy fines and also jail sentences. As both employees and the organization, you can be liable if you don't comply with the food legislation. Okay, so compliance, immense consumer confidence. When you comply with the laws and legislation, it also enhances consumer confidence. It protects customers also and your reputation. So it's always important and imperative to make sure that you comply to the laws and the legislation. Now, the second section, we're going to talk about the food safety legislation. Who is affected? The food handlers and their legal responsibilities. Because when you are in a food establishment, you've got some responsibilities to make sure that the food that you are selling is safe. So the food safety, remember, you've got three very important components that you have to remember. Okay, so the preparation, okay, the storage, and also the handling of the food. How do you handle the food? How do you prepare the food? And also, how do you store the food? So there are so many responsibilities that is before your hand to make sure that the food that you are selling is fit for human consumption. We're going to cover also Food Safety Act 1990. Okay, we're going to be talking about food safety legislation in the United Kingdom, actions and also responsibilities. Okay, how is affected when it comes to food safety and hygiene? Food safety legislation affects everyone. Now, the Food Safety Act 1990, this is the main piece of UK legislation relating to food safety, and is supplemented by the United Kingdom and also the European Union food regulations. Okay, but because of Brexit at the moment, we're gonna be looking at the laws and the legislation that we used to call domestic laws, domestic legislation. The moment now, we don't depend now on the European Union food regulations, because we have now our own domestic food regulation. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. So the main piece that you need to understand, the main piece of UK legislation is what we call the Food Safety Act 1990. Okay, and a food hygiene rating scheme also operates to ensure that food outlets preparing and selling food comply with strict food hygiene standard. So every outlet that, selling food to the public, they have to make sure they have what we call a food hygiene rating. They give them some stars. Some of them, they are 4 stars. Some of them, they are 5 stars. But personally, before I go to any restaurant or any takeaway, I need to make sure that I see that scheme, that hygiene rating, how many stars they have, So, there's no laws that says that they have to display. Okay, they have to display on the window, but it always gives confidence to customers when you display it on the window. I want to know how many stars you have before I can come and give you business. Okay, now food handlers' legal responsibilities. As a food handler, what are your legal responsibilities regarding food safety? So a food handler refers, as I said before, anyone who works in a food business that either handles food or surfaces that are likely to be in contact with food, or maybe equipment such as cutlery, plates, and also pals. Okay, so a food handler, your responsibilities, you've got to make sure that you don't make food unsafe or unsuitable for people to eat. Food handlers also have specific responsibilities relating to their personal health hygiene. The personal health and hygiene is very, very important. The way you present yourself, what type of jewelries you are putting on, your nails and your clothing. So personal hygiene that we're going to cover in this training later on is very, very important. Okay, you remember cross-contamination, because if our personal hygiene is not up to standard, then you see, we can cause what we call cross-contamination to our food, and our food is not going to be safe to eat because of that personal health and hygiene. Now, the Food Safety Act 1990, as I said, that what we're going to talk about, not the EU regulation, but UK regulation, as I said before, because now the United Kingdom is not part of the EU anymore. So the Food Safety Act 1990, remember, it places responsibilities on food handlers or food business operators to protect consumers from eating food that is harmful to them. So this act is really important, very important. So as a food business owner, you've got to be able to understand what this Food Safety Act 1990 says. It places massive responsibilities on anyone who handles food. As long as you're working in a food establishment, this act is in your hands. So it places responsibilities on you, especially if you're a food business operators. So the act actually protects people. It protects consumers. It protects customers from eating food that is harmful to them. Now, the main responsibilities are to ensure that food served or sold is of the nature, substance, or quality consumers would expect. For example, selling haddock, selling haddock as cold, that, against Food Safety Act 1990. So you've got to tell people what it is. If you sell beef, don't sell horse and tell people that it's beef. That's misleading. Okay, so you've got to ensure that the food that you serve or the food that you sold or the food that you present to people is of the nature, the substance, and also the quality that a customer would expect. Now, it's also the legislation, the piece of legislation, the Food Safety Act 1990, it requires that food is labeled. It has to be advertised and presented in a way that is not false or misleading. Very important. You see, when you are a food business operator, you don't have to place people over your profit, because the lives of your consumers, they are very important. So when people coming to buy food from you, you've got to place them first over your profit. That's why we have the officers that we call environmental health officers. Now, these officers, they enforce compliance with the Act, the Food Safety Act 1990. So the government has to place these officers to make sure that they enforce it to the business food operators, because sometimes the business food operators or the food business, the owners, they don't comply with a piece of legislation because they put their profit first. Now, if you are new, you're going into the business of food, you've got to make sure that you place people first because the lives of people matter. So the government has the system, a very good system, that they have officers that we call the environmental health officers. Now, these officers, their job is to make sure they enforce compliance with the act. So what powers do they have? You've got to be able to understand the powers that they have. The environmental health officers, they have the power to enter and inspect your premises. They've got the power. You cannot say to them, you cannot say no to them. When they come into your premises, obviously, they're not going to be calling you and tell you that, no, we're coming today at 10 o'clock. They're just going to turn up. They can enter and inspect your premises. They can take samples and seize any food that is deemed unfit for human consumption. They have that power. And also, they can save a notice on food business owners to make sure that you rectify non-compliance food or other items or charge you with an offense. But the only power that they have, they don't have power to arrest. So what they can do, they can enter and inspect your premises, make sure that your premises is clean, up to standard, up to the legal standard. Or they can take samples and seize any food that is not good for human consumption. But, they don't have power to arrest. You're talking about the actions and responsibilities. So you as a food business operator or the food business owner, you've got to make sure that food is safe for human consumption. We keep talking about this because this needs to stick in us. It has to stick in our head to make sure, because this is very serious business. You've got to make sure that food is safe for human consumption. Make sure that you don't add, remove, or treat food in a way that makes it harmful to eat. Okay, that's why you see, before I mentioned about labeling the food. You see, when you're selling the food, the person needs to know the ingredients, the content of the food. They may be allergic to something that is inside the food, but if you don't tell them, then they eat that food, you're going to be in trouble. You see, so following the Food Act, it tells you the type of responsibilities that you have, the things that we can do, and the things that you can't do. Okay, so you've got to make sure that the food is the same quality that you say it is. For example, I give an example. If a butcher, you're a butcher, or you're working in a butcher shop, so you can't sell horse meat and tell people that that's beef. That's deceiving. And if you are found out, then you're going to be in massive, massive trouble. You see, make sure that you don't mislead people by the way food is labeled, the way the food is advertised, and the way the food is marketed. Make sure you keep a record on where you got food from and show this information on demand, known as traceability. See, in this level 2, we're not going to cover everything about traceability. But if we want to understand traceability, we have to come to level 3. Level 3, that's where we cover everything, okay, in details. Now, your responsibility also withdraw when the food is withdrawn, when unsafe food is being withdrawn. So make sure that you put everything in your report. So withdraw unsafe food, that's your responsibilities. When the food is not fit for human consumption, make sure you withdraw it. Okay, and also you've got to make sure that you complete what we call an incident report. Okay, but make sure you tell people what food has been withdrawn, why, the reason why, or why the food has been recalled. Okay, you've got to do that. You have to display a food hygiene rating. As I said before, if you sell food direct to the public, it's always important to display your food hygiene rating. I know that it is not a legal requirement to display your food hygiene rating, but it just gives confidence to your customers. As I said before, I want to go to a restaurant where they have that food hygiene rating displayed on the window. They are 4 stars, they are 5 stars. I want to see that before I commit myself to eat food in that place.